Good afternoon to all. We at Genealogy Society of Singapore, GSS, once again very pleased to collaborate with the National Heritage Board to organize today's event. As we all know, racial harmony is one of the values we treasure very much in Singapore since independence. Indeed, the root of racial harmony dates back before independence. Today, we are very pleased to have three speakers. All of them are live members of GSS from different racial and ethnic group, Chinese, Malay, and Indian. Today, we also want to talk through not only the racial harmony, but probably more importantly, and also given the GSS mission to promote the knowledge of ancestry. So all three speakers will share with us how their ancestors have enhanced the racial harmony in the past. The first speaker is Mr. Sarafian Salleh. He has been very active in not only his profession in engineering, but in his other activities. He's the co-founder of Bugis Malay Society Singapore in 2017. And he has been very actively conducting various heritage programs for schools and the public. And certainly some of you might have read about his articles in the papers and also have seen him appearing on the television programs, promoting and also sharing the local heritage of the Malay world. Over to you, Sarafian.
Thank you, Mr. Shinliat. Thank you, everyone, for having me here today. Organizers, Genealogy Society Singapore and National Heritage Board. Okay, when I was young, I don't even know that there is such thing as race. There isn't. There is a segregation. There are different societies. All I know was there is only one. There is only one race, which is Singaporean. So as I grew up in Teochew Kampung in Hougang, I realized that there are different people of a different language, different beliefs in religion, and this little separation that I understood became much stronger as I went to school. I went to Montfort Primary School in Hougang. Then I realized that I've got to learn a language called Malay. Then there's another language called Chinese and Tamil. So from then on, I realized that there is some segregation of people that's called race. Okay, then this segregation has been is quite obvious in the language you speak. So from then on, I know that Singapore is a multicultural society. But then again, when I was in that kampung in Hougang, I realized that we were all living together, very happily together. My grandmother has a big house. Then we have people called Chinese and these people called Tamil. They were actually living around my area, and they came to see my grandmother, and we live happily. We are like one family. So I want to share with you how I came about to look at to appreciate this social cohesion. And I do have heard of some events that was really very, very dark, riots. And nevertheless, Singapore has become a very unique community that actually bond us together until what we see today. So what sparked the idea of racial harmony? Okay, so this racial harmony became very serious. It became a very, very important subject after race riots in 1964. Okay, so because of these race riots, because of the non-appreciative character of some isolated people, it caused a riot. So because of this riot, we have to remember that this riot has actually cost many lives. It's very, very expensive to redevelop, into restoring peace, and so on. So these are some of the events that actually taught us what racial harmony is all about. So the way I look at racial harmony, it defines what I define from my research, from oral records, social gatherings. I find that racial harmony educates us to embrace a progressive and peaceful nation building. If there is racial harmony, we can work together. There will be differences along the way. There will be some insults or some things that you really can't match. But it's just a bit of tolerant. From tolerant, you start to appreciate. When you appreciate, you can work together. So what I would say in Singapore, the trend of racial harmony is the multiracial kampung spirit that we have forged together as a single unit has made our Singapore unique. So this racial harmony is not something new. It's not something that occurred after we had gained self-governance in 1959, but racial harmony has existed since the time of Samuel Otama. This was the latest article I did some research on a place in Labrador. Okay, when HDB started to plan to have a redevelopment of 9,000 houses, 9,000 units of house in Keppel, there are some people like from the press, and they actually attended my heritage walk, and they said, Sarafian, I remember you told me that there were racial harmony in Keppel Bay in Labrador. So yes, there was, and still around until today. So what I presented to Straits Times and the Berita Harian was that I think most of us have known. If you go to Labrador Park, there is this dragon's tooth or long yaman. Yes. So this long yaman was actually recorded by an early navigator, marine navigator called Mr. Wang Taoyan. You can see this picture here. That's him. So when Wang Taoyan, when he was navigating through the Straits of Singapore from China to India and vice versa, he was a trader. That was sometime in the 14th century. He realized that when he passed by this dragon's tooth or Labrador Park, he realized that there were a community of Chinese with long hair. I mean, they did tie their hair, so with long hair, and living with the natives. Okay, when you say natives, meaning the Malays or the Orang Lauts. So they were living happily together. They were making this thing called tapai or rice wine, and they were like, they were there together. So it was. One point didn't say racial harmony. There wasn't such thing as racial harmony at the time, but he observed that they were living there together. So if you want to look at how what racial harmony was in Singapore, racial harmony has existed even before modern Singapore. Even before Raffles came and came up with his Jackson plan, segregating the Chinese, then the Indians, then the Malays, and they have the European town. Without that, we are already very harmonious living together. So it was something that made us very unique. So because why I was in these papers, because the universities and the archaeologists wanted to do some archaeological dig based on what I've shared. Okay, of course they have their own scholarly articles to back up their digs, so that when the architects construct the houses in Keppel Bay, at least they have some signs, some structures that shows that it was once a place where you have different ethnic communities living together, and that is Labrador Park. So this is one of the evidences that Singapore was already racial harmony. Okay, talking about racial harmony, how I rediscovered my roots, definitely because of my genealogy. I did some genealogy work. I did some family tree, which I stumbled upon Mr. Kiki and Shin Liat, and I joined this GSS, because in GSS we have a pool of people who are really, they're really deep into rediscovering their history via genealogy. So this genealogy actually brought me to understand who my grandparents was before. So the story started off with Serangoon Road or Serangong. Okay, if you look at Serangong itself, just before I dive into my family, I just want to share with you, these are some of the religious sites, temples, mosques that actually peppered along Serangoon Road from Sota, from the town all the way to Punggol. And along this stretch of road, the first road in Singapore that was constructed by the Crown, has lots of religious structures. We have the we have this Sri Srivasa temple. We have Church of Nativity, which is Punggol. They have this Tua Mukong temple, which is just beside my house now, and Masjid Yusuf. So they're all you see them living in harmony. In fact, there were more mosques and more temples in those days because of redevelopment and acquiring of land. So some mosques, some temples, some churches were eradicated for development. But this was what Singapore was like before. You have streets of harmony everywhere. In fact, just out of curiosity to share with you, there are like 7 streets of harmony in Singapore. South, like South Beach Road, Chulia Street. You have mosques and temples and so on. Okay, about myself. Okay, now I was born in a Teochew village in Aokang. Okay, but this village, there is one road which is no longer around. It's called Lorong Berhala. Okay, fellow villagers call this place Lakau Chok. Lakau Chok means 6 mile. Okay, so it's very popular. Serangong Lakau Chok. If you take a taxi, just say I want to go to Serangong Lakau Chok. They'll bring us to this kampung or this market. Okay, okay. Then despite of being in Teochew village, I'm a Malay, generally Malay, but no, to be specific, I'm of Bugis descent, and I'm 52 years old. So you can roughly figure out how long if I stay in kampung. I stay in kampung, this kampung, since 1970. I was born there. Then because of development, the government asked we all to move out in 1980. So this is just a snapshot of how the kampung look like. If we have a very short time, if the time is really long, I can really explain to you what shops were those before. This kampung, this is the kampung house. You can see me and my brother who's standing there, and there is quite a huge veranda, huge for kampung, and this veranda was where became a commonplace, became a scandal point for lots of villagers, of all races. They come there and just stop, just spend the time after when they came back from work. They'll spend time with my grandmother, and they will just chat their way until the evening. Then they all went home. What's this? Okay, that's my maternal grandmother. Okay, my maternal grandmother, she was a landlady. She was a landlady. She owned this small piece of land, and she rented out to people of all races. So I've got a. We live in the house is long, so we live in front. Then there is a partition. Then at the back, there are rooms, 6 rooms for different people. So this tenants, it's made of mixed ethnic community, the Indians, the Chinese, and the Malays. Most of them are small-time businessmen. They do business. So apart from that, our neighbors around were Hakka, of Hakka descent, Cantonese. Okay, I got a spelling error here. I think Hokkien, Teochew, Indians, Malays, Eurasian. So I get to hear them always talking to my grandmother during those period when I was a little boy. So that's my grandmother, and that's me going to kindergarten. I was 5 at the time. Okay, this is my just to share with you. This is my paternal side. My paternal side, my father. That's my father. Okay, this is a Bugis family. But then my father's grandmother, she's also a mixed Chinese and Dutch. Okay, that's my father. Then that's my mother's family, maternal side. So you can see the pink arrow is my mother. She's also mixed. And then that's my grandfather, the one with the black songkok. Okay, now if you examine my DNA is also a multiracial DNA. It's a melting pot. Okay, I see Filipinos, the Bugis or Filipino, I don't know, but that's what they say. Okay, I've got lots of Thai blood. This Thai blood came from my mom. So you look at my mom, look at her face. Then okay, that's my father and my mother. My grandmother is standing at the back. That's me, my sister, and my brother. Okay? My brother is not a lecturer in University of New South Wales, electrical engineer. So he's there happily. So I've got Chinese, also my mom. Just for your information, my Chinese surname for my mom is Ui, O-O-I. She's a Hokkien. Yeah, this 1.3% European actually came from either my father or my mother. They had Dutch blood. So this actually is a good example of multiracial society. Now you can really see the race. We can see who they are, where they come from. Maybe before those times, everybody was the same, because in those times the world was borderless. Yeah, in those times, our forefathers, they really know how to have fun. So we have all this racial mix. Okay, now I just want to examine a lot about my maternal genealogy, because I witnessed my grandmother really mix around with people of all race. Okay, my grandmother could speak, according to my mother. I interviewed my mother about 2 weeks ago before I had these slides on. So my grandmother could speak Hokkien. She could differentiate Hokkien, Teochew. She can speak Japanese. She knows a bit of Tamil. She knows lots of languages. She can speak English. She can write English also. But she was she went to school until the Japanese came. She stopped schooling. But you know, she was that talented for at that time, you know. So before that, of course, she also had a wonderful husband, my grandfather. So you know, my grandfather was an architect. He was a civil engineer architect. He's a civil engineer. So you see, my grandfather is a man with a songkok. His name is Mohammed Sirat. He was born in 1894. He went to Gan Seng. He went to Hanoi Medical University, but he couldn't see the blood. No? So he switched. I don't know. In those days, you can't do medical. You can switch to engineering. Quite weird. But that's what my grandmother told me, and my mother told me. Okay, so he went to UK to be civil engineer. Okay, he served for Sultan Ibrahim, Sultan of Johor's private army. You know, in those days, Singapore, Malaysia, you one Malaya. So he did serve as a Malay army. I have some of the letters that I kept. Okay. He was also a godson of Sultan Ibrahim at the time, but he doesn't like to be in the Istana, so he left. He came to Singapore, married my grandmother. Okay, married my grandmother during Japanese occupation. They got married at Mount Emily. He worked. This is what I just discovered. He worked at the Japanese consulate as a clerk and translator, and lived at Osborne House in Mount Emily. So this Osborne House in Mount Emily was also the Sultan of Siak Istana once upon a time. Okay, that's my grandfather. Okay, my grandmother sitting in front of him. Okay, she was a landlady. She ran house with 3 rooms. She also did lots of wedding caterers and event organizer. Now, because of this wedding caterer and event organizer, she has lots of people to help her. So I remember some of those, bluntly speaking, some of those abeng, remember, they also came to help her in doing cooking, stirring of the nasi biryani at the back of our house before they actually carry onto the van to go to weddings. Yeah, I remember that. No photographs, but I remember vividly that she did that. And there's this few Chinese boys, that help her. Okay. This slide is just to share with you. If not, I can just remove it. This is Hanoi University. That's the school in the Gan Seng School in Telok Ayer once upon a time. Okay, Anglo-Chinese, so somewhere around there. And that's the Osborne House where my grandfather used to work. Okay, my mother was a bit tight-lipped about all these stories. But then I was able to pry open whatever stories that she had to share with you all. Okay, this focusing on my grandfather. Okay, but this was some of the things that he did. He was part of the constructors for Cathay Cinema. That's him behind Cathay Cinema. Okay, he has Indian workers. I remember my mother told me that during Hari Raya, he would invite all his workers to come to the house in Hougang there and give makan. He loved to do that. Okay. That's his United Engineers contract. Just to share with you. So these are some of his friends. The one on the right, I remember. He's an architect. He's a Chinese guy. My mom couldn't recall his name. He's an architect. Okay, so my grandfather was a civil engineer. So these are some of his friends. He has Indian friends behind him. No? This guy's a Malay, Mr. Samad, I remember. So these are some of the things that carried on until he passed away. Until he passed away, then when my father came into my mom's life, my father also carried on the tradition of helping the kampong, so in terms of free tuition and form fillings and whatnot. Okay, so this is just a snapshot, okay, of what happened before. Okay, my grandfather always helped fellow Chinese, Indians, and Malay neighbors in the kampong, okay, in free tuition, because because he's of engineering background. He always invite anybody who wants to do the homework and just come over to the kampong house. So people come to the house and study and learn from him. So he teach. He taught them. Okay, see, like even form fillings, administration. Okay. Then after, my father continued my grandfather's tradition for the kampong folks until he left Lorong Berhala in 1980. Now I did witness my father. My father would come and my father would be there. The people would come and do some studies. There were even some of the Chinese neighbors, the students from Singapore Poly at the time. They came to my veranda and just do their work. Then my grandmother would be quite abrupt. Hey, where you come from? Where you come from? At home. But then my grandmother would make tea and make epok for them to eat. So that's really very memorable. no photographs. My father didn't take any photographs on that, but I remember vividly. Okay, during the purge, during the Japanese occupation, this was the time when my grandmother just got married to my grandfather. My grandmother gave shelter to some Chinese families while living at one of the houses along Mount Emily. Now it's Sultan. And so she used to rent the house there, and she gave shelters to Chinese families. Okay, during racial riot, this is something very interesting. Racial riot, our family were and reassured safety by our Chinese secret society neighbors. These are some of the so-called gangsters in Aokang. So they even slept at my grandmother's house on veranda and some of the house. They just say, don't worry, Maimun. They call my grandmother Maimun. Her name is Maimuna. Don't worry, Maimun. We will protect you. So you'll be very safe. So that's something very, very touching. And I remember that my grandmother told me that when my grandfather died, they also want to carry my grandfather's the casket, the coffin, the Malaysia casket, just because they love him so much. Okay, so I see it was a common sight for me to witness our multiracial neighbor spending their evenings at my grandmother's house, talking and sitting, and some would bring fruits from my grandmother and they would chat over coffee or tea. This is a very, very, I mean, this sort of thing I'll remember, because my grandmother is a woman of less, she don't talk so much, but people like to crowd around her, talk to her, That's something I cannot forget. Even the Karanguni men who shop Karanguni would come to my grandmother's house to smoke 2-3 sticks before he left. They don't even talk to each other, just quiet. But it's the warmth and connection that they have, which is really unexplainable. I can't explain. So these are some of the visitors that came to my grandma's kampung. This was my mother's birthday. So it's my father. So it's a mix of people from MediaCorp. My father was from MediaCorp before. So MediaCorp and also some of the kampung people, folks. They just come celebrate. So these are common sights for me. I always see something like almost every month. There's always some function that my family would invite people to come. Okay, so that's me. Okay, just want to share with you the multiracial kindergarten in Aokang, St. Paul's Kindergarten. Now, I also went to a Catholic kindergarten. I went to Catholic primary school, secondary school. Okay, so you can see that's me in the yellow baju kurung, Malay. That's my Indian teacher, Miss Willie, a very nice lady. And these are some of my Chinese friends. Some of them are still my schoolmates today, but I couldn't find a photograph. I mean, we went to Singapore Poly, we went to Montfort Poly, That's Eurasian, BG. His name is BGs. I can still remember his name, but I couldn't find his name on Facebook. Very interesting guy. So these are some of the multiracial community. We wear our fancy dress during our event. So this Indian barber, he used to stay at my grandmother's house once upon a time until he got his own house, but he still would walk around every weekend to ask who wants to cut the hair. So my father managed to capture his photograph. So this was the racial harmony of yesteryear. So this kind of a momentum, this kind of a love, appreciation for other race in Singapore is something that's very unique. Until today, I still don't see any segregation. Of course, this sort of the halal and non-halal food, everything's the same to me. Everything's the same. So this is racial harmony today. So I'm actively involved in other cultures also. I would like to know about the St. Teresa's Church. We ran together. Some of them are my old school friends. I also promote our culture to other ethnic community. The Buddhist, I give a talk in ACM, and these are some of the sports events that really forge a brotherhood amongst friends of any ethnic community. So conclusion, that's the same as what I've presented earlier on. Racial harmony educates us to appreciate progressive and peaceful nation building. Okay, the multiracial kampung spirit that we have forged together as a single unit has made our Singapore unique. Okay, thank you very much.
Thanks, Sarafian, for sharing with us the racial harmony during the grandfather's era. The next speaker is Mr. Bernard Chiang. Bernard is also very actively involved in various community services work including servicing in a grassroots organization for the past some 40 years. And arising from that, he has received various service awards. In the more recent years, he was involved and also became a member of one of the interracial and religious confidence circle dated back in the 2005. Let's hear from Bernard, from his perspective, how the ancestors have contributed to racial harmony. Bernard, please.
Yes, thanks, Mr. Salleh. Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for lending me your ears. Okay, you can see the picture here, very unique. Our first president of Singapore. This was a multi-purpose hall in a kampong. Okay, it takes a village to achieve racial and religious harmony. These are all the kampong pictures. The one on the right-hand side, this is my grandmother's house. And two nieces standing in front of the old house built in the 40s. And this is a village community center, we call it. The village association, where most of the people have their activities here. And in front of it was a kampong temple. My dad is standing on the right-hand side here. Then this picture shows a picture of the houses that were built of combustible materials. Those days they were atap houses and wood panels. And this is a common longkang. This is a place famous for childhood fishing. Okay, the village is now occupied by the Serangoon Stadium and the Serangoon Housing Estate. The then leaders of the village initiated these few government initiatives to gel the different ethnic communities through the formation of a firefighting unit, a vigilante corps, and also a free clinic in the 1950s. Chiang village. In the 1950s, the village along Upper Yio Chu Kang Road had a few hundred families comprising of Malay, Chinese, and Indian Eurasian families. There were no running water, strict lightings, and no proper drainage. The village elders were concerned about the safety, security, and health issues. As such, they initiated the formation of a village firefighting unit. It was also a way to unite the villagers of different races through this self-help group. The temple committee is leading the group, and the house fire was very rampant as many villagers didn't have knowledge of fire safety, and the houses was mainly built of combustible materials. The other concern was health care, as many villagers were too poor to consult medical doctors. As such, the temple committee started a free clinic in collaboration with the Catholic organization, the Franciscan Missionaries of Mary, with the support and sponsorship from a notable tycoon, Mr. Lee Kim Ta. I believe most of you know him. He's living in the Hougang area. He's a devout Methodist. You see, through this collaboration, we are able to get the people from different faiths to come together. So there was a unity of people from different faiths, starting a free clinic for the people in this village in 1957. Another government initiative was providing welfare, education, and recreation for the villagers. The temple committee wanted to reach out to more people of other races and religions. As such, the temple committee was renamed as Yio Chu Kang Road Religious Mutual Help Association to resonate with the changing demographics. This is the newspaper report of the opening of the free clinic by the wife of Mrs. Lee Kim Tak, and also was graced by the former assemblyman, Mr. Lim Chung Mong. My dad is in the background. Is helping up in the officiating the opening. See, a free clinic was set up by the village Taoist Temple Committee in collaboration with the Catholic organization, the Franciscan Missionaries of Mary, and sponsored by a devout Methodist. You see the harmony, religious harmony, only practiced in those kampong days. Innovation confrontation. When Singapore joined the Federation of Malaysia, the Indonesian politician leaders were against the formation. They sent their militants to sabotage our country, and a series of bomb attacks had taken place. And the worst incident happened in McDonald House, resulting with 3 dead and 33 others injured. So, in reaction to this, the villagers immediately gathered the volunteer firefighters to dub up as voluntary corps members. This was initiated by the government, and my father spearheaded the formation. His ability to speak Pasar Malay was an advantage for him to connect with the villagers. The role was to patrol and ensure that no Indonesian infiltrators were hidden in the village. The leadership of my father was a reminiscent of my maternal grandfather, who helped the villagers during the Japanese occupation to take cover whenever there was an impending air raid. I learned this about my grandfather when I joined the Genealogy Society in search of my family roots. So we can see that the beauty of genealogy, where you are able to trace your family histories and also your ancestors. So the most important task was to unite and strengthen the bonding among the villagers to fight against the common enemies. The initial militants, supporters, create racial tensions and sow discord among the villagers to spark a racial conflict. So this is a picture of our kampong firefighters. You can see that all my brothers here, and my cousins, myself, I'm here. I was about only 12 years old at the time. We only involved in the kampong firefighting. And later on, when the Indonesian confrontation took place, some of the other one became the volunteer corps members, headed by my father. So he was the head of the volunteer corps, and supported by the MP for Serangoon Garden, Mr. Gonzalez, and sponsored by a billionaire, Mr. To Kim Soo. We are talking about the same thing with Sarafian. I think we are all living in Hougang area, so I think we have quite similar story. So now we're talking about the racial riots. The turbulence in Singapore continue even when we are in the Federation of Malaysia. Due to political differences, the unscrupulous and extreme politicians from our neighboring country took advantage of our fragile racial composition to stir racial riots among Singaporeans in 1964 and 1969. Fortunately, the Chinese and the Malay villagers had already forged a strong relationship through the self-help groups. The minority villagers had a very strong emotional attachment with the kampong and were treated just like our brothers and sisters. We are all in the same boat, very poor and hungry. We have to struggle together to stay afloat. So there's no time to quarrel. We respect each other, religion, cultures, and practices. Every morning we will take breakfast made by the Malay neighbors. We'll take nasi lemak, kuih, made by our Malay neighbor. The son of this Malay neighbor worked at a Chinese neighborhood store and was able to speak very fluent Teochew with all the neighbors. Our strong bonding was irreversible, and we were not perturbed at all by the riot outside the kampung. In fact, the racial riot helped to strengthen our camaraderie. During the racial riot, the Malay villages were taken care by the Chinese neighbors. However, there was a concern that troublemakers from elsewhere would create trouble with the Malay families. So the Malay community were advised to move to a safer place with their relatives or friends till the tensions simmer down. So we move on to the 70s now. Now we're talking about resettlement. My family were resettled to Lorong Yunan Estate in the 1970s. So to continue our service with the community, my dad and some family members joined the Brotherhood grassroots organizations in the 1980s. My dad helmed the Senior Citizen Club, whereas I initiated the formation of other sub-committees such as Indian Malay activities groups, Ladies Club, Tai Chi and Qigong Club, and etc. In 1984, our constituency, Brotherhood constituency, formed the first civil defense volunteer company in Singapore. With a strong support from the Malay youth, most of them were resettled from Punggol areas. With the basics civil defense training, we are able to give a helping hand at the Hotel New World disaster in 1986. It was indeed very heartening to see all fellow Singaporeans from all walks of life, regardless of race or religion, banding together to help in the rescue mission. So during my kampung days, the experience during my grassroots time, I managed to settle a dispute between a Malay wedding couple and a Chinese grieving family. This happened in 1990, with the wedding venue being booked months in advance. Unknowingly, the grieving family also used the same void deck for the wake. So the wedding couple was very upset and insisted the wake to be relocated. Whereas the Chinese family deemed it very inauspicious to shift the casket before the funeral. So I was approached by the town council staff to mediate this very difficult and tense situation. Immediately, we offered them an alternative to both parties. Unfortunately, both parties were adamant. Each have their own strong reasonings. I was caught in a very tense situation with both sides reaching boiling points. To be fair with the wedding couple, I went with another Malay member to negotiate with the Chinese family to put up a partition with a canvas sheet, so to separate the funeral and the wedding. Eventually, it was agreeable by both parties, and the matter was settled amicably without disruption to the wedding. So this was the scene of the Hotel New World disasters. Myself, my sister, my brother, and also a brother-in-law also involved in this rescue mission. This was the last day of the rescue mission. We were there for 7 days. So this was the last day. And you can see that the number of Malay youth inside our company. So we were very cohesive. We will never talk about race or religion. We just want to help each other. And this picture was taken after the passing out parade. We have a 3-month course, and after the course, there is a passing out parade. So the people, this is part of the company. Some of them were left already. So you see, Brotherhood Civil Defense Company was formed in 1984, in time to assist the Hotel New World disaster in 1986. Why I joined the IRCC? With the lessons and skills inherited from my ancestors and a passion to serve the community, I joined the grassroots organization in 1980. Subsequently, was appointed to chair the Red Heights Zone A Residence Committee in 1986, and then moved on to chair the interracial and religious community circles in 2005. The roles of the IRCCs. RCCs serve as an important bridge between the religious ethnic communities at local level. It is an interfaith platform to help multiracial and multi-religious society to stay together and united during and after a crisis, especially one racial and religious dimensions. Under this initiative, the RCCs will be actively engaging representatives of religious and ethnic peace organizations within the constituency to come together, to know one another, develop understanding, strengthening the bonds, and build network of trust. In fact, coincidentally today, we are also celebrating racial harmony within the Marine Parade GRC, Mountbatten and McPherson SMCs. This mega event is organized by combined IRCCs held at Kembangan CC from 2 p.m. to 5 p.m. Okay, this picture is about the reappointment of all the grassroots leaders, IRCC leaders, by SM Goh Chok Tong and Speaker Lim Tan Chuan Jing. And we also invited the veteran politicians, Encik Osman Wok, Mr. Lee Kun Choi, Mr. Joe Concesio, MP of Feather Heights, Mr. Sia Camping, to share with us about the racial riots in the 60s. This was actually held in conjunction together with the Harmony Center. And of course, we have different festive celebrations with the Indian community. We also have a session with the Malay community during the National Day get-together. We invited the mosque officials and the members to attend our celebrations. So this interracial religious community circle, actually we formed in mind to bring all the religious leaders, the school principals, the volunteers of the welfare organization within the same constituency to come on board, so that in time of crisis, we can come together to solve problems within the constituencies. So the lesson we learned was not to take peace and harmony for granted. With the progress of internet and social media, self-radicalization could change a person overnight, and fake news could spread like wildfire. We have to be vigilant and should reinforce our interracial and interreligious harmony at all times. Thank you.
Thank you, Bernard, for sharing. Having heard from Sarafian from the Malay perspective and Bernard from the Chinese family perspective, not only their own stories, but also in the case of Sarafian, dated back all the way to 1300s, and also Bernard's stories about the kampong, and also more recently is a community efforts in bringing racial harmony to a next level, involving not only the family, but also business people, community leader, and some of the national leaders. So the next speaker is Mr. Jayapal Ramasamy. He has been actively involved in various sectors, but professionally he's a consultant, and he's certainly currently still very active in the corporate world, including working as a chairman of a capital investment company, and also running his corporate services firm. So he's going to share with us from the Indian family's perspective on the racial harmony. Jayapal, over to you.
Yeah, thank you, everyone. I'm going through today's presentation from the perspective of my family. which came here about 100 years ago. Just a quick tracking as to where they came from and what is the family position now, and the blend that the blend has taken place over this last 100 years. So a quick run through. Next. So it's a story about the family. Next. So basically, it's I'm going to go through today to cover about the Indian community, the disintegration within the Indian community, and also the integration within the Indian community, and also integration within the interracial aspect of it. And just briefly talking about the new community that has been developing with the Chindian. The reason why I say Chindian is because the Indian and the Chinese, in that perspective, there are also Indian and Malays are Indian and other races as well. But I'm only taking from the perspective of the Indian and the Chinese, because that is where it's predominantly within our organization. So the next is I'm going to go through briefly as to brief history as to where the Indians come from. A short 2-minute video just to give you a quick introduction.
This is South India, home to the Western and Eastern Ghats, the Bengal tiger, the Nilgiri tar, the Indian elephant, and whatever this creature is. Here is also the cradle of Tamil culture. Today, there are about 80 million Tamils in the world. That's more than there are French, Colombians, or Kenyans. Most Tamils live in North and East Sri Lanka or in the southern Indian state of Tamil Nadu, literally Tamil country. Tamil Nadu is now a state in modern India, but for thousands of years, Tamilakam, or the homeland of the Tamils, was much larger and ruled by independent kingdoms. Tamil culture is the last surviving classical civilization because they've managed to keep their beliefs, culture, and language intact for over 2,000 years. But who are the Tamils? From the 19th century onwards, they went as indentured labourers across the British Empire, especially to Malaysia, Singapore, South Africa, Fiji, Mauritius, and the Caribbean, where many have kept their Tamil identities. Tamil is actually an official language in Singapore and Malaysia.
That's it. So I'm going to quickly go to the 5 connected family, and the next is basically will show you where I am linked with the 5 families. If you can see in this chart very quickly, most of the families came from South India, and the earliest person who came in is 1904. So our family has been here for almost 100, slightly more than 100 years, and they came at a different timing from 1924 to 1930, 1908, and you know. So they're quite entrenched family. Next, I'm going to very quickly go through the chart in terms of the family chart. The next one is basically my mother's side. The next one is my mother's side grandfather. And in this chart, I'm going to quickly narrow down as we progress the intermarriages that has been taken place. Next, this is basically a quick photograph of my grandfather. And the next is my grandfather, just to give a quick insight. He came in 1924. He was working at the National Printer's Office. They went through the First World War and Second World War. Even at that time, they started adopting people and doing a lot of community work. So community work started as early as 1920s. Next is some timeline of the marriages, and the 2 circles there shows that the intermarriages that started taking place within my family, but I'm going to show you later on that it's taken place much earlier, not in 2000, not in the it started as early as 1950s. The next chart will show you Mr. P. Govindasamy, and P. Govindasamy is my uncle. It's in the chart. He was a member of Parliament in Singapore, and you can see that within that family, the circle ones are the intermarriages has taken place between the Indians and the Chinese. Next, and this is a quick photograph of him, and I'm going to. As you know that he was a inspector of post. He was he was in the first parliament as a member of parliament. He adopted many children as well and helped in the Indian community a lot in terms of social work. I'm going to show you a 2-minute video on the first parliament. Next.
December 8, 1965, soldiers lined St. Andrews Road for the arrival of the head of state. It was the opening of Singapore's first parliament. It was only 2 years before that Singapore joined Malaysia, but the hopes and aspirations which had accompanied the island's entry into the Federation were short-lived. The attempt at merger had failed. The central government at Kuala Lumpur and the Singapore government had profound differences in their political beliefs. In the end, the only alternative, in order to avoid political and racial strife, was for Singapore to leave the Federation. And on the morning of December the 8th, TAP assemblymen and cabinet ministers made their way to Assembly House to map out a new future for an independent Singapore. Separation from Malaysia also meant that legislative assemblymen who were elected in the 1963 general elections had become Singapore's.
So as you can see, that is my uncle in the first parliament. And you have noticed that even during at that time itself, racial harmony has already taken place with all the different races participating together. Next, I'm going to show you a slide on my wife's grandfather. And if you can notice there that lots of intermarriages between Chinese have taken place there. And one such person is S. Dhanabalan, as you can see, got married to a Chinese in very early days in the 1960s itself. So this has been taking place very early, and you can notice that within our family, the lots of Chindians have been emerging. And even yesterday, I was at a function. Half of our relatives were Chindians. Next. And Supaya is basically a founder of the Krishna, our guide as well. He was born. He came into Singapore in 1908. And he also is a great leader and involved in lots of charity. The charity that he created still does a lot of work in terms of pro bono charity work. Not only the Indian community, they also do a charity to the other communities as well. Currently, they are distributing free bread every week to the community center every Wednesday. Next is basically a chart about my family, which is Ramasamy Naidu. And this even my family. Next one, Mira. Next, and even here you can see the intermarriages have started taking place already. The next chart, next photo is my father, and he's an entrepreneur, and who came in 1930, and he also adopted lots of children and did a lot of community work even those days, even in the early 1930s. Next. And the Ranganathan Naidu is also my wife's grandfather from the mother's side, and this one as early as 1940s. The Chindian, the lady called Anjama on the second is basically a Chindian, although she got an Indian name, but she is a Chindian at that stage. So you notice that the integration and the tolerance have started very early. So this the next chart, this has contributed because the Indians from our family, they came very early years. So this basically started the Indian disintegration. What I meant by Indian disintegration means the Indians came from India those days after 20, 30, 40 years. The customs, the belief, next chart, the customs, the belief and the traditions were all disappearing. That means they have not been practicing. So it became very diluted and caste system, even language. Now my next generation can't even speak the Indian language because we're all speaking English. You know, maybe my generation will be the last generation that we can speak the dialect. The next generation will not be able to speak. So this is all disintegrating. Next. So this integration actually leads to the integration within the Indian races. What I mean by integration next is basically that the caste system is been demolished. In India, they normally they marry within the caste. Now that caste system has been disappeared, and everything and all the beliefs, customs, all have been disappeared. so that it becomes very easy for them to now marry with any caste within Indian. And this then brings to the next one. Next is the interracial integration. This paved the way for the interracial integration. Next, Moira. Yeah. So that when they have the intermarriage, they are not so fundamentalist. They are there, you know, adjusting and moving towards the interracial integration. Next, Moira. Next. Then it moves to intercultural integration now. One is interracial, intercultural. So because the culture has all been dismantled, so we are moving towards the new cultural norm of a Chindian. So what we are talking about is there's a new community called the Chindian emerging. Next. And that now leads next. And that now leads to the interracial tolerance, interreligious tolerance, because there are no more fundamentalists, and they become very tolerant between each other race. I know of Indian doing some of them practicing Hinduism and Taoism together, you know, and there's not much difference in their philosophy and thinking as well. Next, then move to the community integration. Community work has always been core of the family, our family, and we've been doing the community work for many years, and this has been going on with the Kampong Spirit as well. Just quoting a few examples that I also lived in a kampong, one in Mayor Pachetia Road and one in Hillside Drive, that we have multiple families, you know, living together, and common area for where we were playing flying kites, playing marble, hopscotch, and roundabout, and you know, all sorts of game in the community. As Sarafian mentioned, that we were at that time not talking about Indian, Chinese, or Malay, but as Singaporean. So that is I think that's the spirit that I think we should look forward going forward in the future. Next. Next, yeah, and what the few questions that I would like to raise is what is the future of this group of Chindian, whether we call them Indian or Chinese in the IC, and is there classification of Chindian, obviously. Next, and maybe we should go back to our Kampong Spirit and call ourselves Singaporean, you know, and with that, thank you very much.